It was Christmas Eve, and everything seemed perfect. The house was decorated with lights twinkling on every surface. The tree was a masterpiece, and the smell of cinnamon and pine filled the air. It was my favorite time of year, when the world outside seemed to slow down, and everything felt warm and cozy. I had just finished wrapping the last of the gifts, and was about to settle down with a steaming cup of hot cocoa when I first heard it. Soft, distant music, Christmas music. I thought it was just the neighbors' outdoor decorations. Maybe they're carolers or something, but there was something off about it. The notes were out of tune, like someone was playing an old, dusty piano that hadn't been tuned in years. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe it was just the wind or my imagination. I'd been busy all day, and it was easy to convince myself that I was just tired hearing things. But the music didn't stop. It lingered, soft but persistent, like it was coming from somewhere deep within the house. I checked the radio, then the TV, but nothing was on. No carolers, no music. Yet the strange tune still floated through the house, growing clearer, almost as if it was coming from within the walls. Now, I couldn't ignore it. Something inside me told me I needed to find out where it was coming from. I put my cocoa down and stood up, walking through the living room, glancing around to see if anyone else was hearing it. But my family was downstairs, busy with their own things. It wasn't them. The music seemed to be coming from upstairs now, and as I walked down the hallway, it grew louder, more distinct. It was almost like it was coming from the attic. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about how I'd always hated the attic. The wooden stairs creaked underfoot, and the air up there was always cold, like something was hiding in the shadows. But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to go up. I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, and with one last glance at the warmth of the living room, I climbed the stairs. The moment I reached the top, the temperature dropped, and I could feel the cold air prickling my skin. The music grew louder, almost as if it was right behind the door to the attic. I hesitated for a moment, standing at the top of the stairs, trying to gather the courage to open it. I listened closely, and sure enough, the music was unmistakable. It sounded like the faint tinkling of an old music box, playing a distorted version of a Christmas carol. Slowly, I pushed open the attic door. A cold draft rushed past me, and I stepped into the darkness. The only light was the faint glow from the hallway behind me. The music was now much louder, and as I moved further into the room, I saw the source. There, in the far corner, was a small old music box. The lid was open, but no one was near it. Just the soft, eerie sound of the out-of-tune carol coming from the box. I had no idea where it had come from. It wasn't something I recognized, and certainly not something I had ever seen before. The attic was filled with forgotten boxes and old furniture, covered in dust. Nothing in that room had been touched in years. So where had this music box come from? I moved closer, drawn to the box as if it were calling to me. My fingers brushed the cold metal, and for a moment the music stopped. An eerie silence filled the room, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Then, just as I was about to turn away, I heard footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate footsteps, moving toward me from behind. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no one there. Just the dark attic and the faint scent of old wood and dust. The music started again, even louder this time, as if whatever had been waiting in the room was now moving closer. I felt a chill spread through my bones, and I didn't need any more convincing. I turned and bolted out of the attic, slamming the door behind me. I ran downstairs, my pulse racing, but the music didn't stop. It followed me, like a shadow, faintly playing from the living room now, as if it had moved with me. I couldn't make sense of it. How could a music box be playing on its own, and why did it sound so wrong? I searched the entire house that night, checking every corner and room. But the music box wasn't anywhere. It had just disappeared. I couldn't find it, and no one had seen me take it upstairs. Yet every time I closed my eyes that night, I could still hear that haunting, off-key tune echoing in my head. The next day, when everyone was awake, I mentioned it, but no one believed me. They thought I had just been imagining things. But I knew what I heard. The music box was real, but where it came from and why it played that night, I could never explain. Since then, I haven't heard the music again. Not in the house, at least. But every Christmas Eve, as I sit by the tree, I sometimes catch a faint echo of that melody in the back of my mind. A memory of something that was never fully explained. A strange, eerie reminder that some things aren't meant to be understood. And every year, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I had stayed just a little longer in that attic? Would I have uncovered more, or would I have discovered something I wasn't meant to? There's something magical about Christmas trees, isn't there? Each ornament tells a story. Every twinkle of a light carries a memory. But for my family, one ornament stands out above the rest, a small silver bell that hangs near the top of the tree. It's beautiful, simple, and unassuming. At least, it used to be. The bell was a gift from my grandmother many years ago. She said it was an heirloom passed down through the family, meant to bring joy and good luck during the holidays. Every Christmas, we'd hang it in the same spot, right at eye level, so everyone could admire it. It wasn't until last year that the bell started acting strange. It was Christmas Eve, and the house was full of laughter and warmth. The smell of baked cookies filled the air, and the sound of holiday music played softly in the background. We were all gathered around the living room, sipping hot cocoa and exchanging stories. That's when it happened. A soft, faint chime rang out, cutting through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make everyone stop and look around. It was the bell. "What was that?" my brother asked, frowning as he looked toward the tree. "Probably just a draft," my mom said, though she sounded uncertain. We brushed it off and went back to our evening. But then it chimed again. This time the sound was sharper, clearer. My dad walked over to the tree and gently touched the bell. It didn't move. "Maybe it's just loose," he said, though I could see the unease in his eyes. The night carried on, and we tried to ignore the bell, but it didn't stop. Every so often, it would chime, soft and faint, as if someone were gently flicking it. It always seemed to happen when no one was looking. And then came the shadows. It was my sister who saw it first. She froze mid-sentence, her eyes fixed on the far corner of the room. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "See what?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "A shadow," she said, pointing toward the corner. "It just moved." We all turned to look, but there was nothing there. Just the faint glow of the Christmas lights reflecting off the walls. Over the next hour, the bell kept chiming, and each time, someone swore they saw a shadow darting across the room, lingering just out of sight. It wasn't like a person's shadow. It was darker, almost like it absorbed the light around it. By midnight, the tension in the room was unbearable. We decided to take the bell off the tree. My dad reached up to grab it, but as soon as his fingers touched the silver surface, the lights on the tree flickered. The room plunged into darkness for just a second, and when the lights came back on, the bell was gone. We searched everywhere for it. We shook the tree, moved furniture, even checked under the couch. It was just gone. The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence. No one mentioned the bell, but I could tell we were all thinking about it. The next morning, we woke to find it hanging on the tree, right where it had been before. None of us had put it back. We haven't used that bell since. It stays tucked away in a box in the attic, wrapped in layers of tissue paper. But every now and then, on quiet nights, I swear I can hear it, faintly chiming. as if reminding us that it's still there. And sometimes, just out of the corner of my eye, I see a shadow flicker across the room. A few weeks after moving into my new house on the edge of town, I started noticing something strange. The house was old, but had its own charm: creaky floors, the smell of old wood, and an attic full of forgotten things. But there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about: the basement. The basement door was in the kitchen, hidden behind an old creaky door that had chipped white paint. It seemed strange, but I didn't really think much of it. The house had its quirks, sure, but I figured that was just the way old houses were. One evening, after a long day, I decided to go down to the basement to grab a few boxes the previous owners had left behind. The kitchen lights flickered as I opened the basement door, but I didn't think much of it. It was probably just a flickering light bulb. The stairs leading down were narrow and steep, casting long shadows on the walls. As I made my way down, the air felt heavier and colder. The dim light from the kitchen barely reached the bottom, but what really made me uneasy was the silence. It was too quiet, unnervingly still. Then, from somewhere deep in the basement, I heard a voice. At first it was barely a whisper, but I could make out the words. "Come down. Come closer." I froze. My blood ran cold. It was soft and distant, but it sounded so real. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Maybe I was just tired after a long day. But the voice didn't stop. I heard it again. "Come down. You're almost there." Now the voice was clearer, and I knew it was calling to me. For some reason, my legs started moving before I could even stop them. Something about that voice made me feel like I had no choice but to obey. I stepped further into the basement, and the light from the kitchen was almost gone now. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of damp wood made it hard to breathe. But the voice was still there, coming from the darkness. "I'm waiting. Come closer." I looked around, trying to find where it was coming from, but there was nothing, just shadows. My heart was racing, and I started to back away, but the voice didn't stop. The closer I got to the back of the basement, the more desperate the voice became. I couldn't explain it, but hearing that voice made me feel like ice was running through my veins. Something wasn't right. I ran back up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My whole body was shaking, too terrified to think straight. For days I stayed away from the basement, convincing myself it was just my imagination. But every night when I was alone, I'd hear it again, that same voice, calling my name. Weeks have passed, and I still can't bring myself to go back down there. The voice never stops. It's always there, lurking, waiting for me to return. I keep telling myself it's just an old house, but deep down I know something's down there. Something that wants me to hear it. And every night as I lie in bed, I hear that whisper again, deep in my mind.